Liberal commentator Jessica Tarlov is the only sane, reliable voice on the Fox propaganda network, but she's now on maternity leave. And so today, her spot on The Five was filled by centrist British commentator Piers Morgan. And rather than provide any meaningful challenge to his four MAGA co-hosts, Piers effectively agreed with him on everything and characteristically graded Donald Trump on an egregious curve that he would find intolerable if the shoe was on the other foot, and we have to talk about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, so listen, Jessica Tarlov is on maternity leave. She will be missed. Hopefully she and her family are doing very well. And it looks like we're going to be suffering a number of replacements who will not fill her shoes properly. And Piers Morgan is one of them. So Tarlov's role on The Five is to be the token liberal, the token progressive, the token Democrat, the token voice of reason. And Piers Morgan, on paper, is able to do that. When he's at his best, he's a really good debater and interviewer. And he has criticized Donald Trump and the Republicans in the past. But here lately, it seems that he's just consistently at his worst and grading Trump and Republicans, again, on such a ridiculous curve. And we're going to play some clips from this because it's really, really frustrating and just goes to show the perils of enlightened centrism, because it's just affirmative action for Republicans and the right, where just they are constantly graded on a curve in a way to set them ahead and create this false equivalence between them and the left and progressives and liberals, the saner faction. So we're going to play some of these clips and unpack them together.
Peace in the Middle East, economic prosperity for all, and a secure border. It's no surprise that Americans are having Trump nostalgia. A New York Times poll finds that just 25% of Americans view Biden's term as mostly good for America, compared to nearly half who view Trump's the same way. What do you say, Piers?
Well, you know, I always remind myself that if it hadn't been for the COVID pandemic, I think Trump would have won by a landslide in 2020. I mean, I think that completely changed everything, not least, of course, it created the economy, which was purring along very nicely. So I think that, you know, look, with Trump, I always think that he, and we're seeing it again now, the utterly insufferable way that the left go about dealing with Trump, the constant hysteria, the constant attempts to finish him off, bury him, stop him running, and so on and so on. In the end, that I think has the opposite effect, and it makes people think, well, actually, how bad was he? How bad was Trump? You know, he didn't go to war anywhere. He had the economy going pretty well. He had a big idea for dealing with the southern border, which he wasn't able to finish, but it seems a better idea than the poorest state of the border right now. And you put it all together, and if you could just remove Trump's rhetoric, which, of course, is part of his appeal, I get that. If you could take away the rhetoric, then you were left with a reasonably moderate Republican president who just got landed with the worst health crisis in 100 years. And all the impact of that, I think, in the end, cost him the election.
So this is supposed to be the token liberal on The Five. This is the one who's supposed to be pushing back on Jeanine Pirro, Greg Gutfeld, Jesse Waters, and even Dana Perino. And he's not doing it. He's basically saying Trump was great. Trump was moderate. As a matter of fact, we should grade Trump again on a curve. Piers Morgan seems to indicate we shouldn't count 2020. That was the pandemic. We should just count the first 3 years of Trump's presidency, to which I say no, because you would never, Piers, and I'm talking to you because I know you watch this channel, you would never do the same thing if it had been President Obama or President Biden. You would say, nope, they're president for 4 years, and so what happens on their watch counts. And that's the standard that I hold Republicans to as well. And Trump's response to the pandemic was awful, right? He lied about the pandemic. He constantly undercut his own medical advisors and their best medical practices. He didn't use the bully pulpit of the presidency to corral and to motivate Republican politicians to take the virus seriously. And rates of infection and deaths are much higher and have been much higher in red states and red counties than blue states and blue counties. And that's because Trump's lack of leadership. Trump is rightly to blame for this. Deborah Birx, Trump's COVID advisor, said that after the first 100,000 deaths, the vast majority of what followed could have been mitigated if the Trump administration had taken the virus more seriously. That's on Trump, okay? As far as the economy is concerned, he inherited a really good economy from President Obama. So I'm not going to give Donald Trump credit for maintaining it for 3 years before driving it into the ground. Actually, average job creation declined under Trump even prior to the pandemic. But Piers and others want you to believe that when Donald Trump came in office, time reset and he created the 2017 and 2019 era, right? Single-handedly himself. He inherited nothing good from Barack Obama. He did it all himself. And everything that happened in 2020 wasn't his fault. It's so weak and pathetic to hear this from, conservatives and centrists who say that they believe in accountability and choice and liberty. Donald Trump deserves the blame for the terrible things that happened on his watch as long as we can point to his actions, and we can. And by the way, the southern border, Donald Trump was the one who in 2019 shut down the government over the border. He was the one who gave an address to the American people and declared it a crisis and urged Congress to legislate to give him powers to manage the crisis at the southern border. So this idea that the southern border was just hunky-dory under Trump is simply not true. And then also note that Piers Morgan says, listen, the one time he gives even some sort of tepid criticism of Trump, he talks about Trump's rhetoric, which is highly reductive, by the way. Oh, Trump's actions, perfect, amazing, great president, super moderate. But his rhetoric? But also his rhetoric is part of his appeal. He can't even give a single criticism on Trump's rhetoric, right? Absolutely reductive and absurd commentary from Piers Morgan on here, which just completely disregards the many legitimate criticisms that people have of Donald Trump. And by the way, if we're going to talk about that poll, that same New York Times poll also say that many more Americans than not believe that Donald Trump has committed serious crimes. So if you want to talk about the left's prosecution of Donald Trump, which we'll get to after this clip, Piers, then maybe you should consider that the more Americans than not think that Donald Trump is actually guilty of serious crimes and that it's not some sort of leftist witch hunt. I digress. We're going to play the second clip and unpack the rest because it is about Donald Trump's first day in court for this Manhattan hush money election interference case.
Because this case is utterly ridiculous. I always thought if this was the one that came up first, there are plenty of reasons to criticize Trump. There are plenty of cases down the line where there's probably a more serious case against him. This is completely nonsensical to me, that you would take a former president of the United States and you would put him in a courtroom over hush money to potentially a one-night stand with a porn star. And if he's found guilty, he may get a 10-year prison sentence. Have you all lost your minds, America? What a demeaning way to treat a former president anyway. But secondly, if you're on the left, why would you think this would possibly work? Why would you not think that what you're doing here is going to almost guarantee Donald Trump wins the next election? The only thing that could absolutely guarantee it is if he's found guilty and put in a prison cell. Because at that moment, Trump wins by a landslide. This is a farcical case.
So again, Piers Morgan believes that because Donald Trump is a former president, he's entitled to be above the law. The left, how could you bring this? This is a terribly demeaning way to treat a former president. I should also note that Piers Morgan is a staunch monarchist, right? So he believes that the royal family and the crown still has utility and it's still a great tradition. Well, Piers, that's great for the United Kingdom, but here in America, we don't have a king. The president is not sovereign. The president is merely the chief executive officer of the United States, and they're given certain privileges and authorities when they're in office. But then when they leave office, they fall under the law just like every other American citizen. That's how it should be. If we have credible evidence that Donald Trump or any ex-president committed a crime, then they should be prosecuted if the prosecutor in question thinks that a case can be made and that person can win in court. I feel the same way about Barack Obama or Bill Clinton or any other president. It's not just Donald Trump. You all have this weird, gross notion that Donald Trump, and by the way, Donald Trump alone, Piers Morgan would never complain if it were President Obama in jail or in court or Secretary Hillary Clinton or if President Biden is eventually prosecuted. You wouldn't care. It's only Donald Trump in which he's like, no, you can't prosecute a former president. We can and we should. As a matter of fact, healthy, advanced democracies everywhere will prosecute former heads of state. Japan has done it. European countries have done it. When we have France did it, but when we have credible reasons to believe that they've committed crimes, because again, the president is not sovereign. And by the way, it's not the left prosecuting Donald Trump. The left enjoys the prosecution of Donald Trump. The left thinks it's justified, but it's career prosecutors and grand juries, Piers, of everyday American citizens who are presented with the evidence by prosecutors, and then they make charging recommendations. So again, just completely backwards. And by the way, we actually don't know that this will guarantee Donald Trump the election. This has helped him in the primary. But Piers, Donald Trump still has to win the general. The primary is simply step one. And there are plenty of polling issues that Donald Trump has right now. Again, more Americans than not think he has committed crimes, serious crimes at that, according to the very same poll that you all were, gushing over just a few minutes ago. Also, many Americans have said that if Trump is convicted of any of those crimes, that it will cause them to not vote for him or not even consider voting for him. So this idea that this will guarantee a win. And by the way, when were you whining or complaining when Donald Trump was running on campaigns to prosecute Hillary Clinton, to prosecute Joe Biden, to prosecute Barack Obama? Why do you all grade him on such a curve? It's because even though Piers says he's nonpartisan, he is partisan. And it's okay for Donald Trump to do things that he would absolutely object to if anybody else did it. And it's gross, and we should relentlessly call it out and make fun of it. Absolutely. I'll also play this clip from Jamie Raskin, who makes the case that actually this particular prosecution is really serious and it has wider implications than mere hush money.
We only have a minute left, but you're the best framer of history in the moments we're in. So as we look to this week, a criminal trial starting tomorrow, how should we think about this moment in history?
Well, Trump's people would like to trivialize and diminish the meaning of this trial, but in fact, it's perfectly emblematic of the others that are out there. They're all about electoral interference and manipulation. They tried it with violence, and we're going to see that in the D.C. case. They tried it with fraud. We're going to see that in the Georgia case. And here, they tried it with payoffs and then cooking the books, financial manipulation. That's what it's about. It's a very serious case, and I think the Trump people are going to be shocked how tuned in America is to what's going on here.
Yeah, I've not seen any polling which says that the American people don't take this seriously. I'm sure Trump supporters don't, but the polling that I've seen, that even this case, people are watching it, people do take it seriously, and people aren't looking favorably on Trump at the moment. So Piers is conflating the Republican base with the American electorate writ large. There's also a really good op-ed written on MSNBC from a former federal prosecutor talking about this case against Donald Trump. So just going to read some of it here. But hush money payments alone aren't illegal, and falsifying business records is only a misdemeanor. Here, the charges go further. Trump is charged with falsifying business records to conceal an agreement with others to unlawfully influence the presidential election. This is what Jamie Raskin is talking about. Trump is charged with falsifying business records specifically to conceal an agreement with other people to unlawfully influence an election, the 2016 election. That's really at the crux of this. This is an election interference case, not merely a personal matter that Trump, being a philanderer, cheated on his wife shortly after the birth of his youngest son with a porn star and then paid her hush money. This is an election interference case. And Alvin Bragg, the district attorney, will have his opportunity to make the case to the best of his ability. And maybe Trump will be acquitted. Who knows? But this idea that it's absurd and that Trump should just be given a pass for it, a pass that, again, Piers Morgan and those very same four MAGA co-hosts on The Five would never give to a Democrat. They just want us to grade Trump on a curve. And to which I say, hell no, and deal with it. Let me know what you all think in the comments.